Hey y'all, it's Meteorologist Erica Lopez, and we're joining you here tonight, giving you the latest update on the National Hurricane Center. They just updated their track recently at 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So we're going to go over that really quickly by starting off here with the MyRadar app. And of course, meteorologist Matthew Cappucci is here with me tonight as well. He's going to dive really deep into what we're expecting with the storm. But first, I want to start off by showing you the track. So let's go to the MyRadar app and show you what's going on there right now, because the storm, the track has changed. If you haven't been paying attention to the storm, you were looking at it yesterday, it's completely different now, and some concerns across the Florida West Coast are increasing. So let's actually go to the storm now, and we are seeing signs of it rapidly intensifying right now. But as you can see, the track takes it into areas of Cuba tomorrow and into Tuesday as a Category 3 storm. Then it's going to come over to the Gulf of Mexico, where the waters are very warm, and intensify to possibly a Category 4 storm. And this is where it gets a little dicey. So right now, the National Hurricane Center has pushed this track a little bit more east, and we're concerned for areas of Tampa all along the Florida West Coast, Fort Myers, and even including areas of the Florida Panhandle. Right now, there's actually a tropical storm watch in effect for areas of Key West, and a tropical storm warning. Actually, they just updated this to a tropical storm warning for areas of Key West. Storm surge watches now going up with this latest advisory, and this also extends into portions now of Fort Myers along the southern area there, the southern western area of Florida, and all the way up into Sarasota. So if you're under this storm watch, it just means conditions are possibly favorable for this, and once it goes into a warning, this is where action needs to be taken. But also start preparing for this storm as we are nearing this. Of course, this is expected to make landfall between the midweek and even into the late week. So a lot of things changing with this storm track. And of course, we have our meteorologist Matthew Cappucci here. He's going to talk a little bit and show us on satellite the signs that we're seeing with this storm rapidly intensifying.
Hey, good evening. Great to see you, Eric. And yeah, folks at home right now, we got some updates we got to talk about with this storm. And firstly, look at how much it's just blowing up in the past couple of hours. We have what we call convective bursts, or essentially blossoming convection. Shower and thunderstorm activity really becoming quite robust on satellite. This is infrared satellite. So all the purples you see, those are the coolest cloud tops, meaning the highest clouds, likely 45 to 50,000 feet. There's Cayman Island right there, Grand Cayman. And again, notice the other thing too, it's doing something we call a Fibonacci spiral. Now, what the heck does that mean? Watch this. By the end, it's tracing a semicircle like this. So essentially, the inner core is getting going right here. Thunderstorms are wrapping around it. The updrafts from these thunderstorms will vertically stretch the low-level surface vortex. The rest of the storm will begin to form around that and kind of use that as an anchor point. But really, I'm just blown away by how the satellite presentation has changed in the past little while. The other thing, watch, when this thing goes up, it almost sends out like a shock wave in the atmosphere. This is what we call a gravity wave. Essentially, it pushes air up and then down. So as the air goes up, it enhances cloud cover. As the air goes down, it locally squashes cloud cover, making that little moat-like thing right there. But broadening it out, I'm quite impressed seeing everything going on with this. Now, oftentimes, we sometimes see a flare-up of convection or thunderstorm activity at night. The reason being, the upper atmosphere cools off, but the water temperatures obviously stay the same, for which reason it's easier to get thunderstorms to form because there's more of a contrast between the lower atmosphere and the upper atmosphere, i.e. relatively warmer air can rise more quickly into cooler air above. So that's kind of what we're seeing right there. But really, I'm just very impressed by this. Look at the evidence of outflow, or kind of upper level air fanning away from the storm too. The more exhaust we have at the upper levels, the more inflow we can have at the lower levels. All told, this thing's coming together quite nicely, which is a bad sign. Take a look earlier on. You might be able to see this loop. Doesn't appear to be working right now, but I want to show you this. So the hurricane hunters just flew through this again. You know, at the last pass this afternoon, the air pressure was right around 1,003 millibars. Now it's down to 992. Essentially, we lost 1% of the atmosphere's mass. That means the air is being lifted up out of the center of the storm and evacuated away, causing a local deficit in the middle. Imagine you're stirring your cup of coffee. The more you stir, the faster you stir, the deeper that depression, the void of coffee, that deficit of coffee in the middle, that means there's faster spin. Same thing here. So this storm is evacuating more air up the top and kind of pushing it outwards. That means the vortex can deepen, can intensify. There's more of a contrast between outside and inside the storm. So air wants to rush in to fuel the void, but oh wait, as it rushes in, Earth's rotation, the Coriolis force, starts to bend that air so it spins. That's why hurricanes are spinning. All the air is rushing into the middle of the storm to fill that void, that deficit of air pressure, but oh wait, it can't get there because the hurricane is spinning. So this thing right now is a 65-mile-an-hour tropical storm. Here's where the winds, right at the flight level, are probably about like 65 to almost 70 miles an hour. Down at the surface, probably similar, but we're really beginning to see an uptick of wind on the northern and eastern sides of the circulation, even some yellow on the backside too. The other thing, first they found a 997, then they found a 992. So really, as the air pressure gets lower, this thing's getting stronger. But the fact that multiple passes found subsequently deeper air pressure and lower air pressure means this thing is really intensifying quite quickly. It's obvious that it's going to do this. Wind shear, or changing winds with height, very weak, meaning there's very little wind shear. There's nothing to really disrupt this thing. And it's over a reservoir of crazy ocean heat content. Water temperatures, upper 80s to around 90. Anywhere in the purple between Jamaica and Cancun over here, the tip of South America way down there, up towards the Florida Straits. All these crazy water temperatures just imparting a ton of thermal energy into the lower atmosphere that can be gobbled up by this storm. The other thing too, upper level outflow is healthy. What I mean by that, if you look at the satellite image, you can see there's air fanning away at the high altitudes. Now, here's the thing. When air flows into a hurricane from below, or a tropical storm of any type in the northern hemisphere, it comes in counterclockwise like this. Then all that air goes up through the eye wall, but eventually has to be exhaled by the storm. So the storm allows it to fan away and unwind clockwise at the high altitudes. Okay? So it's kind of unwinding, it's spinning the opposite way. That's why if we have a clockwise flow at the upper levels, that enhances outflow even more. And so A, we get more air moving away from the storm, so more can be sucked in the bottom, and it enhances divergence. Divergence is the spreading of air in the upper atmosphere, meaning you have kind of a vacuum-like effect in the upper atmosphere, causing more air to flow upwards. Picture, for example, you have a chimney, okay? So you have this chimney, you're having a campfire in your house, well, like it's not a campfire, but a fire in your fireplace in the house, and you got this chimney going up. If you put a fan on the chimney to suck air up and out, that means more air would rush in down bottom. You'd have the fan, you kind of fan the flames a little bit, the flames would grow. Same exact thing's happening here. So we're really fanning the flames with this system. So already, by like early tomorrow morning, right around lunchtime, we'll have a hurricane west of Georgetown on Grand Cayman Island. Again, they might see the feeder bands here. Wouldn't be surprised if these contain water spouts or a few small tornadoes too. So something to watch on the Cayman Islands. Any of these rain squalls too contain winds gusting to about 35, 40 miles an hour, as well as very heavy downpours. Then watch what happens. This just passes a little bit west of the Isla de Juventud, and really look at that. That's just a mean, nasty circulation right around sunrise Tuesday in Cuba. And this thing's been trending a little farther east. So look at that donut hole, okay? So this is obviously the eye, but look at this band of horrendous, hellacious winds in the eye wall. This is like a buzzsaw vortex. You know, hurricanes are very interesting. By here, it'll probably be a Category 3 storm, a major hurricane making landfall with Cuba. Just outside the eye wall, winds drop off markedly, actually exponentially outside. So over here, maybe 30 miles an hour, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And then you have like a discontinuity and jump straight from like 80 in this band next to, you know, very little wind in the moat here. Then you jump right into like 130 miles an hour. When we say the wind from a hurricane is mainly within this eye wall, the eye wall is that unbroken band of thunderstorms wrapping around the eye, during which most of the air is rising upwards at extreme speed. So this is like the buzzsaw. Outside of this, yeah, it's still windy, but the bigger issue east of the center, surge. Counterclockwise flow, winds out of the south, right against the coastline. Now here's the thing. After this passes Cuba, you get surge on the northern side from the backside of the storm. Then it begins entering the southeast Gulf of Mexico, where it's crazy warm. You'll have continued rapid intensification. By now, it's probably Category 4 as we head towards Tuesday afternoon. You see the timestamp up here in the top right. Look over here, by the way, these spiral rain bands, especially northeast of the center, so over here into the east, these could again contain rotation within some of those squalls, so possible tornadoes in these feeder bands too, overspreading South Florida. So in the past couple of hours, we're really beginning to see our computer models all shift east. And Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, earlier on, you remember there were a lot of them near like Panama City westwards. Almost every single one has jogged like 50 to 60 miles east. So we are really seeing a marked easterly trend.
Yeah, and this has really, you know, I feel like this track, you and I have been talking about it for days.
Yeah.
It's really been keeping us on our toes, because for a while there, it looked like it was going to shift west. Now look at the tracks now, all pretty much east.
Yeah.
And so, this is something we've been talking about for days. This is a changing forecast. And I think this is why it's important. Although landfalls between Thursday and Friday, we still have days to go until this storm actually comes close to Florida. And I think that's the important part that we have to stress here. It's very important for you guys that are watching, and a lot of you from Florida watching us tonight. This forecast, again, is very wonky. It's been the spaghetti models were very uncertain there for a while. And Matthew, what do you think about that now? Do you think they are even more certain about exactly where the storm is going, or do you think there's still a little bit of that uncertainty with exactly where this could make landfall?
Yeah, Erica, I think that's a great point. You and I were kind of poring over this data all night long. I'm quite impressed how much consensus there is through like 3 days into the future. Then, yeah, there's some divergence, but earlier on there was a lot more spread. It seems like the European model and the GFS are beginning to sort of align a little bit more and favor a more slight easterly component. Now, one thing I want to keep in mind, this solution here versus this solution here, world of difference. This solution here is like a major hurricane coming into Tampa. This solution here is like a Category 1 in the Big Bend. It's two different things. So again, things are not certain yet, and there's still a wide variety in different outcomes, but the fact we're seeing more of a tight clumping and more of an eastward trend is quite telling, especially for one model run. One thing I want to point out too, keep in mind between Tampa and the Big Bend, this is probably like an extra 150 to almost 200 miles. If this storm is moving at like 10 to 15 miles an hour, this is an extra day. So if it winds up going all the way to the Big Bend and making landfall versus making landfall near Tampa, this would be more like a Thursday into Friday thing versus like a Wednesday thing here in Tampa. So we have to watch that pretty closely. But the trend sort of is not our friend in Tampa. The trend is not our friend over really anywhere north of Tampa, the Treasure Coast, really north of the Caloosahatchee River. This is pretty concerning. So if this winds up being the case, which it's appearing more likely right now, counterclockwise winds like this, remember east of the storm center are where the worst wind impacts are, but you have winds out of the south. So that would pile water up against the coastline. Look at all these little nooks and crannies on the western coast of Florida. Water push in right here near Naples, Caloosahatchee River, Fort Myers, all these areas. The Everglades, I mean, the only people that live there are alligators for the most part, or crocodiles. Which ones? Is it alligators or crocodiles?
I think it's both.
Damien? Alligators or crocodiles?
I would say alligators.
I can never, what is it? Crocodigators. Yeah. Damien's in charge. It's all those crocodigators. So they got something down there. Anyway, don't go swimming in the Everglades. Tweet us or write us in, or what do the kids do these days? Let us know. And so what I will say is this. Counterclockwise winds like this, it's going to pile water against the coastline. The other thing, too, Florida has a very gentle continental shelf offshore. What I mean by that is the seafloor slopes so gently it's easy to pile water up the coastline. Let's say we're moving our friends out of their apartment. We got to put stuff in a moving truck. If the moving truck has a ramp like this, my gosh, pushing stuff up that ramp is going to be impossible. But if you have a gentle slope like this, it's way easier to push stuff up that slope. Same thing here. So it's going to be really easy to pile water against the west coast of Florida, causing a storm surge, okay? Storm surge is inundation above ordinarily dry ground. Wouldn't be surprised for like a 4 or 5 foot surge in Tampa Bay if one of these holds. And it could even be worse if it winds up being a major hurricane at that point.
Yeah, Matthew, you bring up a good point. It's no surprise that the NHC has actually issued those storm surge watches along the coast down there. I'm really happy to see that. It's days away, but for you guys that live down there, definitely be prepared for these impacts. It might be dangerous as we get close to this day, but of course, once you get close to that, they might start issuing some storm surge warnings, and that's really one of the big issues, I think, with that area, especially just south of Tampa over those regions.
And Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that something we can actually show with the iPad on the National Hurricane Center website?
Yes. So actually, our MyRadar app has the storm surge watches already listed there on your screen, and you see some key tropical storm warnings also issued for Key West. But it looks like the storm surge watches are just south of Sarasota, lining all the way down into portions of Fort Myers. There's also tropical storm watches in place along this same area. So I'm glad to see this. It's getting people's attention at least days ahead of the storm as the track shifts a little bit more east.
That's a really good point, Erica. The storm surge, well, the fact we have a watch out, that means conditions, thank you, Damien, that means conditions could be favorable for an increasing surge later on. A warning means, hey, we got a pretty good idea, surge will happen. But as these turn closer, we're in the bad side of the storm. Not that there's a really good side of a hurricane. The good side of the hurricane is being away from the hurricane. Let's be honest. Like you're not going to book a trip to be in the good side of the hurricane, unless you're me. But overall, you don't want to be dealing with this. Now, it's not the time to panic. It's not the time to go doomsday prepping. But maybe today, tomorrow, as you head into like Tuesday, gas up the cars just in case. Gas up the chainsaw just in case. Start taking away those lawn flamingos. They're cute. They're nice. They're not nice when they're hurtling through the air if you wind up getting wind. So stuff like that. Buy some stuff in case you get power outages. Fill your prescriptions. You can have 3 or 4 days without power, without whatever you need, just as an in case. It's Florida, it's September, it's peak hurricane season. We've got to live in a heightened state of awareness. We've been here many times before talking about hurricanes, and folks here, for the most part, know how to deal with it. But we do have a lot of people moving here from out of state who might be new to this. So this is a good kind of first practice run these next few days. And then as we start
and I'm definitely joining those people, Matt.
Yeah.
Me paying attention. I'm a new Floridian with all you guys who are new. So I know a lot of people in the chat are actually a little bit concerned. They're like, what should I do?
Yeah.
And it's, we're here. Ask us your questions if you have any. And of course, as the forecast evolves, this is a new update from the National Hurricane Center. The next track update potentially will be later on in the overnight hours around 5 a.m. And of course, we're going to be here all night long answering your questions, at least until this evening. But we just wanted to come on and give you a quick update on what's going on. I know a lot to take in. I think there's been a lot of changes with this specific update, Matt.
Yeah. One other thing I want to mention too. So why is there so much sort of oh, wow. Look at this, Erica. So this is the American GFS model. This thing it's a new model run. So the source of uncertainty was this dip in the jet stream over here, or this trough, within which is nestled cool air, low pressure, and spin. Initially, it was looking like this was not going to interact with our storm down here. Now, even the GFS is saying, hey, this might get tugged a little farther east and come a little bit closer. So this is trending, thank you, Damien. This is trending a little farther east. So that's the American GFS. Now, the European model is this one right here. The Euro is even more bullish with this riding into western Florida. So, it's too early to discount the storm because there is increasing evidence suggesting this storm will be moving north and east towards the coastline. Now, the question, how quickly does it actually get to western Florida if it does hit western Florida versus the Big Bend or the Panhandle? Because here's the thing. Depending when it gets there, this trough is dragging down dry air on the backside that'll be wrapping into the circulation, trying to weaken it from inside. However, this model, the GFS, is actually now simulating kind of a holding off of that dry air, if you will, a little bit. And same thing with the Euro. Euro is more bullish on at least keeping the storm sort of self-contained for a little while without really falling apart until it gets north of, say, like this area right here. So the storm will eventually be weakening. The question is, does it come ashore when it's still a powerful cyclone? Here are the latest tropical storm force wind probabilities by the National Hurricane Center. And wow, notice this. Erica, I'm sure you've seen there's more purple here, so increasing odds of strong winds near or just off the coast. And keep in mind, these are sustained winds. So even though it says the sustained wind might be only 50, 60 miles an hour in the red areas, which is still impressive, you might get gusts well above hurricane force in some locales. Like down here, they're definitely getting Category 3 winds, 130 miles an hour in parts of Cuba. But really, in this area, if you're in the red, I'd say now is the time, like tomorrow morning, go to the grocery store. Get some stuff just in case. Stock up just in case. Make sure your prescriptions are filled.
Definitely prepare for power outages in those regions. And using the app. So let's actually pull that up, Damien, so we can actually see the arrival time of these tropical storm force winds, probably, and also hurricane winds there as early. Like Matt said, take the day tomorrow to get prepared because these winds could arrive as early as Tuesday morning, especially down in South Florida. And this is going to be pretty much almost an entire, this whole week event as these winds arrive over these regions. So a lot of people are actually asking questions in the chat. Matt, where can I find all this information? I think a lot of this information, you can also find it from our partners at flash.org. There's a lot of information there to keep you hurricane safe. A lot of good resources there. There's a checklist that you can print off and check the things that you need if you haven't prepared already in advance of the storm. Like I said, maybe a lot of you are new to the state and don't necessarily know what to get, aren't new to hurricanes, especially over areas of the Florida West Coast there. So flash.org would be a good resource for you guys to find all this information. Of course, listen to your local emergency managers, and especially if you're in the Florida West Coast there where you're under a tropical storm warning or tropical storm watch and even storm surge watches, definitely go and know where your evacuation zone is, especially if you live on the coast. It's very important because once they issue these evacuation orders, you're going to want to get out of there as quickly as you can. So it's always important to look up where your evacuation zone is ahead of time, especially as, we're getting into Monday.
Yep.
Tuesday is when we're going to start to see these winds arrive, and then pretty much the rest of the week from there.
Erica, I got to say, I know you're not from Florida, you're from Texas, and you said that, you're sort of new to hurricanes. You're killing it.
Thank you.
Spoken like a Gulf Coast emergency manager. You know all the resources. I mean, heck, I'm learning stuff there, too. By the way, is there any chance we could find it in Max, the Hurricane Center cone graphic? I forgot to put that at the end of the show, but...
Yeah, let's actually put that up there for you, Matt.
It's great. We call this a big board. I want to call it the big bird because... It's big board. Oh, perfect.
And, guys, we're also ingesting this data as it comes in here.
Yeah.
So,
So, I mean, we're tweaking stuff behind the scenes. Erica's doing a great job kind of running the show over there. Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah, this is a...
So let's put that up there.
Perfect.
Okay. It should be behind you there, Matt.
Awesome. Yeah, this is looking great. Thank you so much. So, yeah, okay. So we're still expecting a couple new trends. Number one, this is shift a little farther east. So again, we're expecting a greater confidence of this coming into Cuba as a developing major hurricane. If we can, here we go. So now, look, Category 3, just offshore of Tampa. This is actually where we're expecting the center to go. But keep in mind, there's so much wiggle room. This is the average error of the National Hurricane Center. If we actually go back to where we were, here we go. The average error of the National Hurricane Center at, say, day 4 is about this wide, meaning the center, theoretically, could track this far over or could track this far over. So there's going to be a lot of wiggle room in either direction. So Tampa, Fort Myers, especially near and north of the Caloosahatchee River, anyone in this zone, this is becoming a Florida problem. It wasn't looking like as much of a Florida issue earlier on. I mean, yeah, it was always going to be Florida all along, but really the risk is increasing. And we know, I tend to be a pretty conservative forecaster. I will say the risk is increasing for power outages. Tampa, Clearwater Beach, up towards the Big Bend, Homosassa Springs right here. Let's say, for example, it comes ashore only as a Category 1, only in air quotes. Here's the thing. Category 1 is still going to produce a lot of wind. Palm trees go down at like 40 miles an hour. At the same time, too, you get a significant surge 4 to 6 feet east of the center with the Category 1 around here, and a lot of rainfall and some tornadoes, too. Because as hurricanes make landfall in the northeastern or the right front quadrant, you have the surface winds slowing down, but the upper level winds still keep churning. So you get wind shear, or changing winds with height, that causes individual squall lines and thunderstorms to rotate. Hence why you could actually get some rotating thunderstorms moving shore too. So really, this is becoming a bit of a problem. We don't want anyone to panic. We don't want anyone to ever panic. Panic's never a useful emotion. Instead, education is power. The more you understand what this storm is, how it's working, the sources of uncertainty, and our relative confidence levels, the better you'll be. I will say we are less confident than average with this particular system. What I will say is confidence is beginning to increase in greater impacts for the Gulf Coast of Florida. Erica, you think that's a fair way to sum it up? We're not sure yet, but we're becoming a little more concerned.
Yeah, especially, as every day I think we're going to get more confident in exactly where this storm, what areas it could impact. But of course, if you're on the Florida West Coast, I know you Floridians are resilient. I've seen those comments out there all across social media, and I've even had to ask some of my Florida friends, like what are things that you think about when you're preparing for a storm? And usually, everybody here in Florida, they're very resilient against hurricanes. Some of you guys have been here for years. So help out those neighbors. If there's somebody new in your neighborhood, or maybe somebody new who moved to your apartment, isn't sure what they're doing or what stuff or supplies they need during a hurricane and tropical season, just help out your neighbors. A little bit goes a long way. And I know for me especially, it has gone a long way. And even portions, maybe you're not going to get impacted by the storm. It's still helpful to be prepared in advance, to know what you're going to do before a storm even arrives. We're in the peak of hurricane season, and you're definitely seeing that with this storm, Tropical Storm Ian, already seeing it rapidly starting to intensify here. And something too that we've been talking about, me and Matt, is it'll be interesting to see what this storm system does in the overnight hours and as we wake up tomorrow morning.
Oh, yeah.
And so, a lot of people are talking in the comments here, and they're really interested in, the track here of this storm. And of course, I was saying the uncertainty that it was up to this point, I think, is very interesting with this specific storm system. And Matt, what do you think about that? A lot of people are chatting like, if you weren't looking at us or tracking this storm, maybe even 2 days ago, it is completely different than what we're seeing on the screen right now.
It certainly is. And you know what? If I weren't an atmospheric scientist, I'd say to myself, why can't those meteorologists ever figure it out? They're always changing their mind.
Yeah.
And in reality, that's kind of the case. We're trying to predict the future. We're trying to predict how air, water, and sunlight and heat are going to combine to produce a system that is extremely dynamic, that is interacting with other atmospheric ingredients, that is fickle, that is capricious, and we're trying to figure out what it's going to do and where it's going to go. So this is sort of our best bet at this point. One thing I want to point out too, Erica, we see the tropical storm icon in Georgia as we head towards Friday evening.
Yes, it's now inland.
Yeah, so
that's something I want to mention.
Yeah, the winds will be weakening inland. You're not going to get your house blown away if you live in Statesboro or Georgia. However, as hurricanes, tropical systems make landfall, their winds weaken, but they start unloading all their moisture. And there will also be a cold front over here, so all that rain is going to be pushing towards the cold front. We could get something called a predecessor rain event, basically a narrow strip where the cold front squeezes out tropical moisture enhanced by the jet stream somewhere in Georgia or the Carolinas with a heck of a lot of rainfall, maybe a foot plus. But the other thing too, near and east of the center, a couple possible tornadoes. But Erica, can we go back to our infrared satellite, if at all possible, and the beginning of the hit real quick? That'd be much appreciated, because I really want to show folks that, gosh, you were fast with that. Thank you.
I know.
Jeez. I need you at my TV station.
Tell me what to do, I'll put it on the screen.
Apparently. So, what's interesting, and let me know what you think of this. It seems like in the past little while, we're beginning to see like a full wraparound develop, convection northeast of the center, and it almost looks like we're beginning to see the first development of what later will evolve into an eye. And when we had supper earlier on, we had pizza, by the way. What was the name of the pizza place we had?
I think it's like Planet Pizza.
They were unbelievably good. If you're in Orlando anytime soon, get Planet Pizza. Gosh, it is so darn good.
Not sponsored by them, by the way. We just
No,
pizza.
they're so good. I feel like I'm in a food coma right now, but it's like a happy food coma. Anyway, see, I'm gonna have to run 5 miles.
I know, we could talk about pizza all day.
Honestly, I probably will. This is tomato sauce colored. Anyway, we see the full wraparound of the heaviest convection on satellite with the first kind of hintings of an eye right here developing, which is kind of cool to think about. The other thing worth noting too, look how far away from the center we're seeing convection bubble up. So that just kind of goes to show you how impacts will occur way away from the storm center, way outside the cone. Look at this convective blob, several hundred miles off the south and east. So impressive stuff there. One other thing I want to point out too, cells are beginning to move to the north. You might remember last night when we did this video, we had northerly flow, kind of sheer, sort of pushing things southwards and not really allowing anything to escape, shed north off the circulation. That shear, that chaotic wind with height, has since relaxed. Oh, one other thing I really want to show you, and let me see how I can kind of identify it. Okay, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see this. Damien, would you mind letting me know, is this something we can take full screen? Okay, awesome. Damien, you're the best. So here's what I want to do real quick, Eric, if I can sneak past you. I want to pause it right. Where is the pause button? Okay, here we go. So, where is it? There's a feature I noticed, loop. Okay, here we go. I want y'all to notice right over, where's the pointer tool? Oh, thank you. Pals, where are we going? Okay, Erica, you're the best. So let's move this. I want y'all to notice right here, okay? So this is obviously an explosive thunderstorm development right here. I want to fast forward just a little bit. Watch what happens towards the edge, okay? We move this arrow up here. Notice a slight lessening of the colors right here. So what's happening at the tropopause, or the ceiling of the lower atmosphere, this is like a mushroom cloud going up, pressing upwards so much that we're actually beginning to see air curl back down on the periphery of that, resulting in what we call a gravity wave. So we fast forward a little more, and we'll be able to see that gravity wave now spreading outwards. It's really tough to see, but let me play it a couple times, and I want to sort of watch that. So watch that gravity wave, not yet. Boom, gravity wave spreads out.
I saw that.
And then there's another one right at the end of the shot, which we can kind of see a little better. Yeah, watch it right over here. You'll see it in just a sec. So for the folks at home, I know it's nerdy, but there it goes, right there. You can see it to the south as well. So ready? I'll try to follow the gravity wave with the cursor. There it goes. So we actually come back to full screen real quick, so that way I can point it out for folks, okay? Or rather, come back to me. Here we go. So ready? Let's actually just throw it and play, if we wouldn't mind. Okay, ready? So here it goes, and we'll do it one more time. Right there. So that subtle discoloration. Anyway, what that basically means is this storm is pushing so much air quickly, it's sending out ripples at the tropopause, or the ceiling of the lower atmosphere, which is cool to see, but gosh, look at that. In just the time we've been doing this stream, the satellite presentation has just changed to an extremely impressive extent. So we're really seeing that manifest right now.
And you know, like I feel like this is something that, we knew was going to happen, but it was almost like a waiting game. Nothing happened all day today. It actually weakened a little bit in one of the advisories from the National Hurricane Center, but now seeing this come into I guess a full circle, full flotation there over the Caribbean. It's not good news for Cuba. This is something that we don't like to see, but it is very interesting meteorologically. I love seeing, I wouldn't have noticed the gravity waves unless I, zoomed in there, Matt, but a great presentation of what is happening out there in the Caribbean right now.
It's always, I don't want to say alarming, but there's always something sort of mystical about seeing intensification happen, because the ingredients are there. You almost start to think to yourself that these things seem sentient. The fact that they behave in a certain way, that's part randomness and part science. But it's just amazing to see. We're always forecasting rapid intensification, yet when it actually happens, it's like an atmospheric symphony playing.
I feel like rapid intensification is almost like a new tropical term.
Yeah.
That was used in the year of 2020. 2020 was a very active hurricane season. And I think that's the year that we really started to learn more about rapid intensification, at least if you were, not a meteorologist. It's a term that we've always known, but it's something that is now more and more common with these storms.
Yeah, that's a great point on so many fronts. For the folks at home, rapid intensification means an uptick of 35 miles per hour or more in 24 hours. 3 days before Category 5 Michael hit the Big Bend of Florida on October 10th, 2018, it was just a tropical storm. It rapidly intensified all the way. Most, if not all, major hurricanes undergo rapid intensification at some point. So we're seeing rapid intensification obviously ensue right now. Another thing, too, that Erica alluded to is that we're seeing this more these days. So there's a greater propensity for storms to undergo RI, or undergo rapid intensification, because warmer waters, changing climate dynamics. So things like this are made slightly more likely by human-induced climate change. We're going to see rapid intensification with storms periodically throughout nature just in general, but we're sort of tipping the scales a little bit, and we saw that a ton in 2020. Again, a visible satellite we can't see right now. Seeing obviously the pressure is dropping in the middle as sort of the bottom falls out of this, and it's evacuating much more air from the top. But these water temperatures, Erica, when you see temperatures like this and shear's weakening, it's just a recipe that virtually guarantees explosive tropical cyclogenesis, i.e. rapid intensification.
So I'm reading the comments now, and a lot of people are concerned about impacts of storm surge, rain that's going to come in here over the next several days. And again, you're still a couple days out, but right now, if you haven't prepped, if you're on the Florida West Coast, now is the time to prepare. And again, we're just digesting the new information from the National Hurricane Center. They've issued these new tropical storm watches across the Florida West Coast, tropical storm warnings for the Keys, and even areas of storm surge across those same areas that are under tropical storm warnings. But something else too, before it even gets to Florida, it's going to get to Cuba. And this is, I think, where they have a greater risk of storm surge. Across Florida, yes, but Cuba for sure. Here within the next couple days, they will be impacted by the storm. And what's interesting about this storm is it's going to rapidly intensify. We're going to see that here over the next several days. And it's going to make a first landfall in Cuba, and then a second landfall somewhere in Florida.
The issue here is, Erica, that I'm kind of concerned about. Cuba's so thin. What I mean by that, it's only like 40, 50 miles south to north, that by the time this thing realizes it's over land, starts to throw the brakes on, it's back in the Gulf, rapidly intensifying once again. If we back up a little bit, I want to show you this graphic one more time. Look how quickly this thing really just develops a full eye wall. And look at that. By Monday afternoon, this thing will be a buzzsaw. And then look at this. It just kind of really comes together quite prominently. This is the buzzsaw of winds wrapping around the center. This is where winds will gust to about 120 plus miles an hour near the coastline, about 80 to 110 over land. And then look in here, this is where sinking air is kind of squashing any cloud cover and really sort of limiting just how bad it'll be inside the storm. But then look, this thing really comes together once again. You know, one thing that's kind of cool, Erica, and this is the IBM graph, I want to pay attention to sort of how, oh gosh, you're going to hate me. Is there any way we could pause right now? Oh, perfect. Okay, let's go slow. Now, look how oval-shaped this eye wall is. Of course, this is just a model, one simulation of what could happen. And now let's play it out a little bit, and look how wonky it becomes. See that? Like, look at all these things. Okay, so if we pause right here, so we see it almost looks like a rectangle. So obviously, we're not going to have a rectangle-shaped eye wall, but Erica, you know, what I think this model is trying to key in on are mesovortices, or smaller eddies within the larger eye. So here's the deal. I hope folks at home know what angular momentum is, but really angular momentum is just basically, you know, you got some spin energy, you got some oomph for spin, and if you're staying spinning, you sort of want to maintain your angular momentum. It's like, here, how's a good way to put it? It's like if you're the ice skater, okay? The ice skater, and you're doing a twirl, and you have your arms in like this. If you throw your arms out, you'll slow down. Or if you start off going slow and then pull your arms in, you'll spin up, thanks to angular momentum. Kind of same thing here. Now, this is where the angular momentum is the greatest in this ring, the eye wall, because winds are going fastest around and around and around and around and around. But then in the eye, there's next to no wind whatsoever, so you have like a abrupt drop-off in angular momentum. So you have a discontinuity right here. The eye wall of a hurricane shouldn't exist because of this discontinuity. There's so much angular momentum here and next to nothing here that the eye wall theoretically wants to break. It really does. So the way that in strong hurricanes it handles this angular momentum gradient or change in distance is by fluxing angular momentum into the eye. How do we do that? By contorting the eye wall and having many whirls within the actual eye itself that bend the eye wall in slightly different directions. So Erica, if we can take this out a little bit into the future very slowly, you'll see sort of how irregular, oh, look right here. Look, see how weird that eye wall gets? Like how wonky it is, okay? So like this weird little eddy. Same thing here. This is not like a circle shape. So it's showing essentially what it perceives as being, oh, this is such a beautiful animation. Yeah, so it's showing what it perceives to be eddies within the eye. And then eventually what might be an eye wall replacement cycle, then this thing really gets organized as it pushes past the Isla de Juventud and into Cuba. And wow, look at that. Yeah, so Eric, if we doing a great job. I appreciate you humoring me as I really geek out with this. And eventually this pulls back into the open ocean and it becomes problematic for the Gulf. So we've got to go through this graphic one last time. I want to show folks what else we're expecting. Again, all of the spaghetti models are pushing this farther east than they once were, which is a concern, especially for areas like Tampa and as we head towards north, like the Homosassa Springs area. Really, anyone north of the Caloosahatchee River should be growing more concerned with this. And ultimately, here is the cone from the National Hurricane Center. The storm right now is borderline a hurricane, not quite yet. It could be near major hurricane status just west of Tampa. It eventually goes all the way north into Georgia too. So Erica, I think we're going to kind of wind down soon. Hopefully folks have some questions. They'll let us know what they're thinking, what they're experiencing themselves. But ultimately, sort of what are the biggest concerns people have at this point? Of course, you guys at home, write us a couple questions. We'll take, say, 3 or 4 of them before we call it a night. And of course, we'll be back here tomorrow throughout the day. We'll have an update coming in the morning. And Erica, we don't sleep until hurricane season's over.
Exactly. We're going to be here with y'all all week, giving you updates on this storm. It's been keeping us on our toes. I feel like we've been talking about this storm for what seems like weeks. It was trending. We were seeing it in the different models. And this week is definitely the time to prepare, guys. I know you Floridians are resilient, but a lot of you are also new, asking questions in the chat. And something else I want to point out too, because we were having a lot of questions from you guys in Georgia. And, I think something with this storm is we can focus on where initially it'll make impact, especially as they get closer to the Florida West Coast. But there's a lot of impacts that can actually affect inland locations. Let's say, for example, as you're seeing on the track there, behind Matthew, it might be a tropical storm as it reaches areas of Georgia. And if you remember, I actually lived in Atlanta, Georgia, I think during Zeta. And although Zeta was weakening as it went inland, some of these areas aren't used to these types of weather events. And some of the dangers that we could have with this is definitely a lot of flooding over these regions and even gusty winds. And winds can definitely knock down power. So you guys across the inland locations, I would start preparing and start thinking about what you would do if you lose power, especially heading into this next several days, especially by the weekend. Inland impacts are definitely not ruled out. As you're seeing with the track of the storm, areas in Georgia, the Carolinas, start thinking about your plans, what you would do if the storm were to impact your locations. But what I'm concerned with this storm, especially in the inland locations, of course, is the possibility of flooding, winds, but also severe weather. We can't rule that out. And I think that's something important that, we focus a lot on the storm surge, which is definitely very dangerous, the winds, but also the severe weather impacts that we can have with these types of tropical systems, Matthew.
Yeah, most definitely. I've chased tropical tornadoes before, and here's the thing. These hurricanes, even tropical storms that are beginning to weaken over land, there's so much extra spin at the upper levels that spin begets spin. Low pressure likes to have smaller lows within it. So, you might have a hurricane within which you have smaller rotating thunderstorms. Within those rotating thunderstorms, maybe a tornado, and then tornadoes have smaller section vortices within them. Anyway, spin begets spin. Just a cool old weather adage. But what I mean by is basically this. Anyone near and to the right of the storm center has that chance of a couple tornadoes spinning up with the tropical remnants, even as far as the Carolinas, really, in addition to very heavy rainfall, too. So just because you live hundreds of miles inland, don't think that, you don't have to pay attention to this. You could get severe weather out of this. Last year, September 1st, I was in Washington, D.C. Hurricane Ida hit Louisiana. The remnants went up the coast, were way weaker than a tropical storm at that point, but that leftover twist gave a tornado right near my house that completely de-roofed a school and an ethnic grocery store, too, destroyed a number of homes, too, and I was there right as it was happening. And I got to say, it was interesting to see a tornado within the remnants of a tropical cyclone, but ultimately, that's what could happen. The other thing, too, Erica, about these sort of tropical cyclone-spawned tornadoes, Beulah back in 1967 made over 120 of them. Ivan in 2004 had about 130 of them. The tricky thing with them is that oftentimes you can't see them because LCLs, or lifting condensation levels, i.e. cloud bases, are so low to the ground that you can't really see anything until it's on top of you. So definitely severe weather risk Friday into Saturday across portions of I'd say, eastern Georgia, the Carolina Piedmont, the coastal plain too, Charleston even, something you guys got to watch there. But Erica, when we see this line, this 3 icon offshore of Tampa, it shows us, we can't guarantee a major landfalling hurricane, but we can say there might be significant impacts somewhere across the west coast of Florida. And ultimately, I think that's a big takeaway tonight.
Yes, I agree with you, Matthew. And, a lot of folks asking when's the next update for the National Hurricane Center. There's actually an intermediate advisory about 2 a.m. But then at 5 a.m., if there's any significant changes to the track, this is when they'll issue these. They'll also start issuing watches and warnings during this time as well, as we saw tonight. These are newly issued tropical storm watches and even warnings across portions of Key West and storm surge watches. So you guys, if you got an alert on your phone, this just means to pay attention to what's happening with this storm. I know you Floridians have been paying attention for it for days. But again, this track has changed, I would say, significantly if you weren't paying attention over the last several days. But I think we're going to wrap it up here, Matt. It's getting pretty late here, but of course, we're going to be on answering your questions. If we didn't get to your question here tonight, message us on social media. We're going to be here keeping track of the storm all week long. And of course, our storm chaser, Aaron Jajak, we're going to see him in Florida here over the next several days. We have full team coverage, as you saw earlier tonight. Meteorologist Mike Linden was here. We're going to have our tropical weather expert here later in the week. And then, of course, we're going to be here keeping you updated. Matthew Cappucci is here from Washington, D.C., helping us with the storm, coverage locally here in Orlando. And, of course, we're here in Orlando. I saw a lot of you guys giving us a shout out. You know what Planet Pizza is. Here locally in Orlando. But of course, I think, with this storm system, it's just very important for you guys. I want to stress this, to pay attention, especially over the next several days. Know what you're going to do, gather those supplies. If you didn't have time to do that this weekend, definitely, if you're anywhere across the Florida West Coast, tomorrow morning, now, as soon as you can, now is the time to do it. And especially if you're inland, start thinking about what you would do if you were to lose power, as these inland impacts may be significant.
Erica, I think great points. And with that, I think we'll probably call it a night. We really are grateful to everyone who's tuned in. Share this stream with your friends. Share the news about MyRadar. I might be biased, but I think it's a pretty darn good app. And with situations like this, It alerts you, it gives you custom forecasts for your location, and believe me, we have a ton of science that goes in behind the scenes. This is not one of, the regular iPhone app. This is the MyRadar app. We use our own algorithms, we process, we have a full meteorology team, people with PhDs in things that we can't even pronounce. Very impressive stuff that, there's a lot of reasons to download this app and to make sure your friends have it too, and ultimately it might save your life.
And I know for a lot of you, I also do bilingual content. So if you know any friends or family members that don't necessarily speak English, we have a lot of bilingual content that we've been updating on our social media platforms. So make sure that you're sending this to your friends, especially during this time, tropical season, especially in Florida. I know a lot. For me, I hear a lot of Spanish going around in Orlando. I speak Spanish, and so we got you covered on that front as well. Of course, our team behind the scenes has been with us all afternoon long. Shout out to you, Damien and Jake. Thank you so much for helping us with the stream. And thank you to all of you guys. A lot of people watching us tonight. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate each and every one of you. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to send us a direct message. Matthew Cappucci is on Twitter, so you can find him on there as well. And
nice things.
Yes, nice things. And we'll see you back here tomorrow. Once again, full team coverage with our whole team of meteorologists here, keeping you safe throughout the rest of the week. And of course, updates on what's going on with Tropical Storm Ian, eventually Hurricane Ian and its impacts to the Florida Peninsula. With that, I'm going to say goodnight to all of you. Stay safe and make sure if you have any questions to send us those messages.